Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have now got myself a cup of tea and we're gonna have a discussion.
Men have accomplished unbelievable things when they've denied themselves whoopee.
Joseph Daniel Unwin was an English ethnologist and social anthropologist at Oxford University and Cambridge University. While looking over the Twitteridoo, the ex-Reno, I saw 12 books that you absolutely must read by Whatifalthis, Mr. Rudyard himself. And in one of these books were Sex and Civilization by JD Unwin. And I thought to myself, well, I have not seen this book before, let's have a gander. The conclusion of the book is quite simple. With increased sexual liberation of a civilization, the faster the decline. If sexual norm breaks down, increased sexual liberation, the higher risk of civilizational collapse and inevitability if it continues. This conclusion was brought forth by looking at history, looking at different civilizations and different tribes, seeing that once the sexual norms changed to a more liberal sexual norm, sooner rather than later, that civilization collapsed. And there are different categorization and degrees of sexual restraint. 1. The complete sexual freedom, no prenuptial restraint at all. 2. Irregular occasional restraint, meaning cultural regulation requires on occasional periods of abstinence. 3. Strict chastity, remaining a virgin until marriage. Post-nuptial categories. 1. Modified monogamy, one spouse at a time, but occasionally can be terminated by either party. Modified polygamy, men have more than one wife, but a wife is free to leave her husband. Absolute monogamy, only one spouse permitted for life until death in some culture. Absolute polygamy, men can have more than one wife, but wife must confine the sexual quality, i.e. activity, to their husband for the whole of their lives. A good description of all of this can be found in kirkdurston.com. kirkdurston.com. He does a really good job in explaining all of it. He's one of the scholars of Unwin. But I get it. Enough with the pure scientific read here for a little moment.
I just went up there and performed sexual favors. 634 blowjobs in 5 days.
He has categorized and sought out 2 data points. The idea of sex and sexual norms with the idea of civilization. And he says, the more restraint a man is, the better he is in activities. And the more sexual partners, or the more times he spends on sex and uncertainty, the worse it gets. And there is a lot to this, but it's incredibly outdated because we already have more than enough other data points to look at to see how this is per se correct in some factors, incorrect in other factors, correct in the factors of restraint, post gratification. It's actually one of the most important aspects on doing something. Conscientiousness, that's also one thing that is incredibly important. And restraint and conscientiousness goes hand in hand. If you keep yourself with one wife and your sexual life is on occasion, your focus on having to spend time on sexual activity will be lessened and you will spend more time on other activities. But if you spend a lot of time constantly having to hunt for women, in a more polygamous sense, you will spend more time on the sexual aspects and less time on fruitful, high cultural, which creates an uncertainty in the relationship, in which makes the man have to worry about the well-being of his wife to such a degree that it can take him away from certain other aspects. Obviously, the well-being of your wife is very important. And you know the dumb saying, happy wife, happy life. The point being, yeah, of course it's important, but no-fault divorce in particular can be very detrimental in the sense of a woman can always go, I don't like me for any reason whatsoever, and divorce you, creating stress in a relationship and uncertainty. It's more or less if a man feels that he's not fully secure in his partner, he's not gonna want to spend energy on the high cultural aspect and has to spend more energy satisfying his wife to such a degree that it's a bit ridiculous. Mostly because the divorce can be done when he's not at fault, the woman just feels, I need a better life, and then moves. And it's not that that per se is always the cause for relationship breakdown. Sometimes it's other abuse and things like that. But just that exists in the cultural zeitgeist, that you have to think about it in the back of your head. Maybe I shouldn't get married because you will divorce me for any reason whatsoever. The entire point of human civilization is to have children. And to have children, you must catch yourself a wife. Make that wife secure, make that wife well fed, make that wife safe. That's your job. And if that breaks down, you will no longer strive for the same thing in the civilization, and it will break down. And there's another aspect to all of this. It's the more energy you spend on the sexual hunt, the less time you spend on things that are not about gratification. So if you open a polygamy, you have 5 baby mamas. You're not going to spend time reading Hegel because you're too busy with all the 5 baby mamas that you gotta be doodling and daddling. And that goes into anything, and casual dating, casual things. You spend a lot of time on that because that's your primal urges goes to. I do want to interject in a few things here. It's way too focused on sex. I understand that is a necessity in any life to have sex, but we have learned something in very modern time, that sex itself is not always the main goal, because you can gratify yourself with many other things, such as, pornography, the hentai, the anime waifu pillow, the AI girlfriend, and the rest. You can get those primitive needs other ways. Obesity is a big issue. Alright, well, you don't need to have sex if you eat a bunch of stuff. You feel good. It's the feel-good feeling, The feel-good feeling is being filled by other things, that it's not just sex anymore. So that's why the sexual thing, while important to look into, it's outdated because there's so many other factors as well that does a breakdown. And then the third thing I want to talk about, he mentions, Unwin, that a civilization that has a controlled sexual norm will thrive and do better. And any civilization without this sexual norm, a more liberated sexual norm, a higher amounts of sexual activity, will always collapse. And this I can't really agree upon. But I guess that's what you mean with civilization. Because in the end of the day, isn't it just about numbers? Or maybe it isn't, maybe about the quality of the child. But numbers still matters. If a civilization, another one, a foreign one, maybe not as advanced as yours, have on average 4 children, and you on average have 1.5, in 100 years, who is going to be the dominant culture? It is whomever has the babies. So whomever has the more babies will dominate. Or maybe that isn't true. Maybe it's the quality of the child. But all of this is not really looked upon and worth looking into. So to conclude all of this is a few days after there's no longer any tea. More or less this feels very much a Catholic-focused idea. They talk a lot about the aspect of God as well, and the Michael Jones and a lot of the Catholics like to compare sexual gratification with the decline of religiosity, which is like, okay, sure, look at that one thing only then, if you choose to. But also what I mean with what I mean a lot with the other things that keeps you busy, such as pornography. It is, let's take Japan for example. They have a very low birth rate, but it's not like their women are complete slags. None of them have sex, male or women. Shouldn't that then be the perfect society where everybody, in the end of the day, will be absolute monogamous because they're not having sex? Or if they're getting married, it's very much in the late 30s. But that is too late. So they're not having a lot of babies and they're going to die out. South Korea as well. They're dying out because they're not having children. Standard, odd sexual standards in the sex department. They have it in other apartments that breaks that down as well. So it's like, what about those aspects? Those has to be looked into as well. What breaks down the need and want for a family, and what breaks down the need to postpone gratification? Anyways, goodbye everybody.